friends, welcome to my channel. I hope you all are fantastic and reading well. So before few days we did a poll on Instagram page and most of you were facing difficulty memorizing the syndromes, right? From today we are beginning with the syndrome series. So today in this video lecture we are going to study about Sjogren's syndrome. Those who are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook where we do daily image-based questions. It will help you to revise and strengthen your concepts. And to get a free PDF of any of my video lecture, you can get it from my Telegram channel. So now, any further ado, let's get started. Sjogren's syndrome was first noticed by Dr. Henrik Sjogren. Okay, that's why we call it Sjogren's syndrome in 1933. He first noticed this syndrome in one of his patients. So Sjogren's syndrome is basically a chronic autoimmune disorder, okay, in which our own body produces antibody against our exocrine glands. And that's why the common symptoms are ocular dryness, oral dryness, exocrine dysfunction, lymphocytic infiltration and destruction of our exocrine glands. Okay, mainly the salivary and the lacrimal glands are affected, and we found the particular dryness in eyes and in the mouth as well. It occurs typically in women, and as I said, immune cells attack our exocrine gland. Okay, so this is the basic what you should remember about Sjogren's syndrome. Now this Sjogren's syndrome is classified into two, primary Sjogren's syndrome and secondary Sjogren's syndrome. Primary Sjogren's syndrome is known as Sitka complex, okay? Please do remember it that Sjogren's syndrome is not Sitka complex, okay? Primary Sjogren's syndrome is called Sitka complex, in which you see dry tongue, dry skin, dry eye and enlarged glands, okay? But no autoimmune diseases have been found with primary Sjogren's syndrome, okay? In the secondary Sjogren's syndrome, it involves autoimmune diseases apart from dry mouth and dry eyes, okay? What kind of autoimmune diseases we see? We see systemic lupus erythematosus, as you can see in this first picture, okay? And then rheumatoid arthritis might be seen with this, or scleroderma, or polyarthritis nodosa, or polymyositis. Such kinds of autoimmune diseases can be seen with dry mouth and dry eyes, then it's a secondary Sjogren's syndrome. Now demographics. It occurs most commonly in women, as you know, but perimenopausal or postmenopausal women, okay? And female to male ratio is 9:1. According to Schaeffer's, it is 10:1. Younger individual and children may also develop it, but most commonly it is seen in females, mainly perimenopausal or postmenopausal, okay? Women with Sjogren's syndrome are at increased risk of having offspring with congenital heart block, which is autoantibody mediated damage of atrioventricular node. This you need to pay attention to, okay? Now etiology. So it could be a genetic predisposition, environmental triggers, pathological injury, autoantibodies, which causes the onset of autoimmunity, okay? Our own immunity cells produces the antibodies against our own healthy cells, okay? And or it could be a clinical disease. So all gives rise to a Sjogren's syndrome. The perfect or the accurate etiology of Sjogren's syndrome has not been found yet. So there are so many reasons which are associated with it, okay? Genetic, hormonal, infections or immunologic. But most authorities consider an altered immunologic response to be the main intrinsic factor. Now the Sitka complex, which means we are talking about Sjogren's syndrome, primary. They are associated with HLA system, okay? Specifically HLA-DR3 and HLA-DRW52. Yes, you have to remember this exactly as it is written, okay? You might have seen few MCQs regarding this if you have solved MCQs, okay? So this is very important point. And this point as well that cytomegalovirus, paramyxovirus, and Epstein-Barr virus have all been implicated in pathogenesis of this condition. So, which three viruses are associated with Sjogren syndrome etiology are these three. So, from etiology, these 2 points are very important. Clinical manifestations, okay, virtually all patients complain of dry mouth, okay, because of the damage to salivary glands, and they attend difficulties in speaking, okay. Basically, all the symptoms associated with xerostomia are seen in Sjogren syndrome, okay. So let's see it. Difficulties in speaking, tasting, swallowing, okay, and they need to sip liquid throughout the day. Xerostomia may first become evident with nocturnal awakening. This is very important subjective sign which gives an indication of a patient is affected with Sjogren syndrome. And nocturnal awakening with thirst and need to have chewing gums and lozenges to stimulate saliva production, okay. Then they have dysgeusia, hypogeusia, coughing and choking. Dysgeusia means altered taste sensation and hypogeusia means less ability or perception to the taste, okay. And coughing episodes and choking. Painful mucosa and sensitive to spices and heat just because of xerostomia, right? Dry, cracked lips and angulocheilitis. Intraorally, mucosa is pale, dry, friable. Saliva becomes thick and ropey, okay. Tongue becomes depapillated and painful. These all are symptoms of xerostomia, okay. Mucocutaneous candidal infections are common, particularly erythematous form. Guys, this you need to remember. Then removable prostheses are less well tolerated due to reduction and retention, usually afforded by saliva. In the 20 to 40% of the cases, there is enlarged salivary glands, and in 25 to 60%, there is parotid enlargement, okay, which is seen with Sjogren's. Here you can see the dry, depapillated tongue, okay, and also notice the lips, how pale they have become. Primary Sjogren syndrome more frequently manifests parotid gland enlargement, which is a Sicca syndrome. And in Sicca syndrome, it is more frequently associated with lymphadenopathy, purpura, Raynaud's phenomenon, kidney involvement, and myositis. Here you can see the unilateral enlargement of the parotid gland, okay, which is more frequently associated with our Sicca syndrome or primary Sjogren syndrome. Oral burning sensation, stomatitis, glossodynia is a common complaint. Glossodynia is a painful tongue, okay. Patients with Sjogren syndrome have higher levels of karyogenic and acidophilic bacteria such as Lactobacillus acidophilus and Streptococcus mutans, and that's why there is a distinctive decay pattern which is seen in Sjogren syndrome patient. As you can see, the areas in our mouth which are more resistant to caries. In such areas, we will see caries in case of Sjogren syndrome, like labial surfaces of the tooth, right? Usually caries don't occur on labial surfaces or on the root surfaces, right? But in the Sjogren syndrome, due to the dry mouth and condition of xerostomia, such a peculiar type of caries occurs. Primary Sjogren syndrome patients are at an increased risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Guys, pay attention to this. This can be your MCQ, okay? Which type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? Most commonly mucosa-associated B-cell lymphoma, okay, which is also known as MALT, mucosa-associated B-cell lymphoma. And other variety of NHL which is found with Sjogren syndrome is diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, okay. Histological features. There are 3 types of histologic alteration in major salivary glands have been described, okay. So 3 types of histologic alteration. First is lymphocytic infiltration of the gland replacing all the acinar structures. Second, proliferation of the ductal epithelium and myoepithelial to form epimyoepithelial islands. This is MCQ in Pulse, okay, in which diseases epimyoepithelial islands are found. So apart from Sjogren syndrome, there are many other diseases But remember that Sjogren syndrome is one of that, okay? Atrophy of the gland sequential to lymphocytic infiltration. So basically what happens, there is a lymphocytic infiltration, okay, which leads to the atrophy of the gland, and there is proliferation of the ductal epithelium and myoepithelial, okay. So in this image we can see microscopic view of chronic inflammation in the minor salivary glands, okay, in this image A. This is the image taken from the minor salivary glands with tissues from the inside of the lower lip of a patient with Sjogren syndrome. And as you can see, this dark islands type, these are lymphocytic infiltrates, okay. Here is the other image in which you can see these large areas where it shows what? It's the lymphocytic infiltration into the glands. Now diagnosis. How we will diagnose ki yes, this is the case of Sjogren syndrome. So in 2012, ACR proposed classification criteria according to which patient with sign and symptoms suggestive of Sjogren syndrome must have at least 2 of the following 3 objective features. Now guys, this is the latest classification which I could found in Burkitt's, but you can also check for the very current or latest classification. Labial minor salivary gland biopsy is considered to be the best sole diagnostic criteria, okay. As you can see here, minor salivary glands are readily accessible under the mucosal surface, right? So we take the biopsy from minor salivary glands, not from the major one. And here you can see the primary closure after the dissection and removal of the superficial minor salivary glands. MRI or CT scan can be helpful in the diagnosis, but MRI is preferable over CT, and technetium 99M radionucleotide studies may also be used to determine salivary gland function. Presence of anti-nuclear antibodies, like these are our anti-nuclear antibodies which are associated with Sjogren syndrome, okay. It is very simple. I used to remember it as ROLA, okay. These are 2 anti-nuclear antibodies. So it's just to remember and make it simple. So it is associated with higher rate of extraglandular manifestation of Sjogren syndrome. Sialography can be an important diagnostic aid in which what do you see? You see a fruit-laden branchless tree appearance, okay? This can also be asked as your image-based question. So just see it nicely and observe it, okay? It is a branchless tree, fruit-laden appearance which is seen in Sjogren syndrome cases. Then Schirmer test. Here the Schirmer strip is inserted inside the lower eyelid, basically the conjunctival sac, and it is kept for 5 minutes. This test is used to check the dryness of the eye. Now coming to the treatment part, there is no definitive treatment for Sjogren syndrome. We only give the symptomatic treatment, right? Like we can give secretagogues, which are sugar-free gums or candies. FDA approved medication is pilocarpine and cevimeline. Both are muscarinic agonists, okay, cholinergics, as we have studied earlier. Pilocarpine 5 mg 4 times daily, or cevimeline is 30 mg 3 times daily. Then we can also give salivary substitutes like hydroxymethyl containing oral spray. Corticosteroids are also useful, but only in those cases with extraglandular manifestation, okay. So corticosteroids will basically decrease the allergic and the inflammatory response of the body, right? And anti-malarial drug, which is hydroxychloroquine, which is recently in the news because of this corona thing. So this hydroxychloroquine, it increases the salivary flow, it reduces the erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and C-reactive protein result in improved immunologic profile. So in Sjogren syndrome patients, HCQ has a very important role. Immunosuppressant agents like cyclosporin A, azathioprine, methotrexate can be used. Interferon alpha is also one of the treatment. Then we can use monoclonal antibodies like rituximab. Guys, this drug is most commonly used to decrease the B cell depletion, which is initially developed to treat the B cell proliferative disorders. Why we give it in Sjogren syndrome? Because here there are chances of development of NHL, right? Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a B cell related tumor. So that's why we give this monoclonal antibodies, which is rituximab, specifically CD20, okay? And then CD22, which is ipratusumab. So these two drugs are important for you. Do remember it, and these two drugs are also given in the treatment of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as well, okay? So do note it.